Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the fascinating history of Oyaki. It's a humble dumpling that perfectly captures the geography, the resilience, and the living tradition of Japan's Nagano region. You know, when we dig into regional foods, we're really exploring the history of the people who made them. And today, we're looking at a food that is as deeply rooted in its landscape as any culinary tradition on Earth.
Okay, consider a pretty stark contrast here. When most of the world thinks of Japanese cuisine, we immediately picture delicate sushi, right? Or rich ramen, or crispy tempura. But for the folks living inland, high up in the mountains, reality was, well, very different. It was the hearty, simple, totally unpretentious oyaki that actually kept generations alive in the rugged mountains of Shinshu. It's simple, it's round, and it's quite literally packed with the flavors of survival.
So, let's get into Section 1, Born from the Mountains, the harsh geography of Shinshu. To really wrap our heads around why Oyaki was even invented in the first place, we have to zoom out and look at the deeply isolating landscape of Nagano Prefecture. I mean, the sheer scale of this environment is just staggering. The Japanese Alps completely dominate the area, soaring well over 3,000 meters. Long before we had bullet trains or highways, these towering peaks meant intense isolation. They brought incredibly short growing seasons, narrow strips of usable farmland, and long, brutal winters where the snow just buried the villages for months on end. Because of that cold, mountainous terrain, growing celebrated staple crops, like rice, was practically impossible, so farmers had to get creative. They ingeniously relied on tough substitute crops just to survive the winter. We're talking buckwheat or soba, barley, millet, wheat, and whatever beans, root vegetables, and leafy greens they could literally coax from the frozen soil. Every single harvest was absolutely crucial. And this brings up a really important point. Oyaki was not born as some fancy culinary luxury for wealthy merchants or royalty. Not at all. It was a brilliant, highly practical solution for everyday farming families, woodcutters, and villagers, so that absolutely nothing went to waste. You just mix some flour with water to make a simple dough, and whatever ingredients you had lying around, you tuck them safely inside.
Let's move to Section 2, Heart of the Home, the traditional mountain farmhouse. We're going to step away from the snowy peaks for a second and head inside the warmth of one of these cozy homes from about 200 years ago.
If you were to walk into one of these rural farmhouses back then, the first thing you'd notice wouldn't be the furniture, it'd be the irori. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just a kitchen hearth, it was literally the beating heart of the home. This sunken hearth is where the oyaki was cooked, where the tea was always boiling, and where grandparents passed down stories of the harvests and mountain spirits to their grandkids while the winter storms raged outside. Making oyaki right there at the hearth was an incredibly sensory experience. First, you stuff that simple flour dough. Next, you steam it so the dough gets nice and tender. And finally, you plop it directly over the glowing charcoal of the irori to develop this slightly crisp, perfectly golden brown crust. Honestly, the whole process filled the house with an unforgettable, deeply comforting aroma of roasted wheat and warm miso.
Now, here's where it gets even cooler. Some regions used a totally unique method called hayaki. Instead of grilling the oyaki over the fire, they actually buried it right in the hot ash. I know, right? It just goes to show how cooking techniques evolved entirely around the specific tools and fires available in these isolated communities. That hot ash gave the dumpling a gentle, even heat, resulting in a wonderfully soft interior and this rich, subtly roasted flavor.
Moving on to Section 3, Flavors of the Seasons, Nature's Calendar Inside a Dumpling. You see, Oyaki doesn't rely on a strict, rigid recipe book. Instead, it follows the rhythmic calendar of the mountains themselves. The fillings constantly shift to reflect the exact season, turning the dumpling into this living, breathing record of the agricultural year. In spring, it's all about sanzai, wild mountain vegetables gathered right after the snow melts. Summer brings fresh eggplant and green peppers from the garden, usually seasoned with miso. Autumn gives you the natural sweetness of pumpkin and rich shiitake mushrooms. And winter? Well, that's when you bring out the preserved foods, like dried daikon and pickled greens, just to make it through the freezing cold. And speaking of winter, we absolutely have to talk about Nozawana. This is Nagano's famous pickle. Ask any local, and they'll tell you straight up, you cannot truly understand Shinshu until you've eaten a steaming hot, salty, crunchy Nozawana oyaki on a freezing snowy day. It provided vital nutrition and flavor when the fields were completely locked under ice.
So what's the big takeaway here?
Well, the dough stays almost exactly the same, but the fillings change constantly. The true beauty of oyaki is this extreme adaptability. Whether it's sweet azuki bean paste or savory wild mushrooms, that humble dough acts as a blank canvas for the local landscape. Every grandmother, every single village, has their own signature style of folding and filling.
And just think about how brilliantly designed this was for the time. For farmers working long, exhausting days out in the fields far from home, or kids walking miles to get to school, eniaki was essentially the original zero-waste packed lunch of the mountains. It was highly portable, you didn't need bowls or chopsticks, the ingredients were perfectly enclosed to prevent spilling, and it was still absolutely delicious even after it cooled down.
All right, let's wrap things up with Section 4, a living Japanese tradition, surviving modernization and preserving history. Let's look at how this rustic mountain food somehow survived Japan's incredibly rapid modernization in the 20th century.
When supermarkets, cheap rice from other regions, and 24-hour convenience stores finally made their way up into the mountains, they brought a major existential question with them. Why spend hours kneading dough and prepping seasonal veggies when you can just buy a ready-made meal? That exact question threatened to wipe out traditional regional foods all across Japan.
But, surprisingly, oyaki didn't die out. Instead, it transformed. People quickly realized that while supermarkets offered convenience, oyaki offered something convenience stores literally never could. It offered a deep connection, a taste of home, memories of standing next to their grandmothers at the irori, and a profound sense of local pride. It shifted from being just a food for survival to a powerful symbol of cultural identity.
And today, the tradition is thriving. While classic recipes are fiercely protected and sold at local roadside stations called michi no eki, you'll also find specialty shops experimenting with wild new stuff. We're talking cheese and curry, local apple and sweet potato, even chocolate. On top of that, community cooking classes are teaching younger generations how to knead the dough, proving this tradition is very much alive, flexible, and still evolving.
This whole evolution really hits the nail on the head regarding the ancient Japanese proverb, Ishoku Dogen, meaning good food is the source of good health. Whether the original creators of oyaki knew that exact phrase or not, they absolutely lived it. They used local, seasonal ingredients grown in mountain soils to nourish not just the physical body, but the entire spirit of the community. So, to leave you with a final thought, the next time you're enjoying a comforting, handmade snack, whether it's an oyaki, Nagano, or a childhood treat in your own hometown, take a moment to ask yourself something. What hidden histories, what generations of resilience and love might be folded right inside your own favorite comfort food? Sometimes the greatest stories of survival and community are found in the simplest things. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.